thousands of people are quietly fleeing the hells of scam compounds in Cambodia. They climb over barbed wire fences, slip past locked iron gates, and evade tight surveillance in search of a way out. Yet when they finally step into the open, what awaits them is not complete freedom, but an uncertain future. No documents, no money, no place to belong. For many, freedom is only the beginning of another brutal journey. One recent night in Phnom Penh, Yuga, an African man, nearly wept with joy simply because he was able to lie down on a bed. The bed had no pillow and no blanket, set inside an overcrowded common room. But after 2 days of sleeping on the streets, it felt like a blessing. Just days earlier, he had escaped from a scam center in the border town of Osmach, near Thailand, one of many hotspots in Cambodia's sprawling online fraud industry. Yuga had exactly $100 left in his pocket. He dared not spend a single dollar, keeping it as a last lifeline in case of emergency. By chance, he was taken in by a Catholic charity shelter run by Caritas. Yet even that stroke of luck was fragile. The Caritas facility is operating far beyond capacity. Staffing has been reduced to a third of what it once was, funding has been drastically cut, and the number of people seeking refuge has surged to unprecedented levels. More than 300 individuals have already been turned away simply because there is no space left. Mark Taylor, an expert on human trafficking in Cambodia, described the situation as triage in an emergency room. Those in the most critical condition are admitted. The rest must leave, even though nothing but hunger and danger awaits them outside. As of last week, the shelter was housing around 150 people. New arrivals sleep packed together in communal rooms. They carry nothing but the clothes on their backs, no suitcases, no documents, no phones. There are not enough blankets or pillows for everyone. The most urgent concern in the coming weeks is not space, but food. According to Taylor, they are scrambling to feed people meal by meal. Videos circulating on social media, verified by Amnesty International, show scam compounds releasing people in large numbers in recent days. The organization interviewed 35 victims who described chaotic and dangerous escapes. People jumped walls, scrambled across rooftops, and ran through the night with no plan and no protection, only the instinct to survive. The wave of departures followed Cambodia's extradition of Tran Chi, alleged to be the mastermind of a vast transnational scam network, to China. Prime Minister Hun Manet has declared cybercrime a top priority, yet the gap between political statements and realities on the ground remains troubling. Li Ling, a rescue worker, says she is currently tracking more than 200 Ugandan and Kenyan nationals who are pleading for help after leaving scam compounds. With no other options, she has spent roughly $1,000 of her own money to provide temporary accommodation for the most desperate cases. But personal funds cannot sustain a crisis of this magnitude. Embassies say they have no clear roadmap for resolution. International organizations report they are full. Responsibility is passed back and forth, forming a vicious cycle with no exit. Monse Farrar, Regional Research Director at Amnesty International, emphasizes that thousands of survivors suffering psychological trauma are receiving little attention. They have escaped forced labor, violence, and threats, yet they lack counseling, reintegration plans, and long-term protection. Fear, shame, and trauma follow them long after the compound gates have closed behind them. Tragically, some have returned to the very scam centers they fled. When faced with the choice between hunger on the streets and going back to a place of abuse, survival sometimes means accepting the lesser of two horrors. Freedom without livelihood becomes a burden. The Cambodian government rejects accusations that it is abandoning victims or tolerating abuse. Information Minister Net Piaktra has stated that all individuals are screened to distinguish victims from perpetrators and that victims are provided shelter, medical care, and assistance to return home safely. Yet the overcrowded shelters and the sight of people sleeping outside suggest the system is overwhelmed. In recent years, online fraud has become a global scourge. Sealed-off compounds operate like cold, efficient money-making machines. Inside are soundproofed phone booths, carefully scripted deception strategies in multiple languages, and even fake police stations staged to intimidate victims abroad. Recruited workers are forced to call, text, and cultivate online relationships with targets worldwide. Failure to meet quotas can result in threats, beatings, or confinement. Caritas previously received financial support from Winrock International, a partner of USAID in Cambodia. The plan had been to receive $1.4 million from September 2023 through early 2026. However, the funding was cut after President Donald Trump suspended foreign aid programs and dissolved USAID early last year. The abrupt cuts left victim support initiatives struggling to survive. The shelter also receives partial funding from the International Organization for Migration, IOM, which itself relies heavily on U.S. funding and has likewise faced budget reductions. Jacob Daniel Sims, a specialist at the Asia Center at Harvard University, notes that the number of established organizations, both willing and adequately resourced to address this issue in Cambodia, is extremely limited. Meanwhile, the transnational scam industry remains vast, complex, and constantly evolving. Yuga's story illustrates this painful cycle. He says he was frequently beaten for refusing to work. He was lured to Cambodia last November after receiving an email offering a job with all expenses covered. Suspicious at first, he declined several times, but the recruiter persisted, promising high income and a professional environment. Eventually, amid financial hardship, he agreed and fell into the trap. Upon arrival, his passport was confiscated. He was required to meet daily fraud quotas. When he resisted or failed to deliver, he was punished. The months that followed drained him physically and emotionally. Returning home is not a viable option. Yuga belongs to the Banya-Mulenge community, primarily living in the Democratic Republic of Congo, where armed conflicts are frequent. He says his community has often been targeted by armed groups. Even if he could afford a plane ticket, safety would not be guaranteed. Moreover, his country has no diplomatic representation in the region to assist with repatriation. Before being trafficked, Yuga was a university student. His dream was simple: finish his studies, find honest work, and live an ordinary life. That dream was interrupted by months trapped inside a scam factory. Yet he has not given up hope. He says he wants to resume his education one day and rebuild his life with dignity. In the crowded room in Phnom Penh, surrounded by strangers who share similar wounds, Yuga waits, waiting for asylum, waiting for support, waiting for a decision from somewhere beyond his control. The waiting has no fixed timeline. Days stretch into weeks while the shelter's budget dwindles. This crisis is not only Cambodia's story. It reflects a transnational web of fraud in which victims are both exploited laborers and unwilling cogs in a global criminal machine. When compounds are raided or disrupted, the workers who were coerced into them become the responsibility of fragile support systems already pushed to their limits. Behind political declarations and statistical reports are real human beings like Yuga, carrying fear, hope, and dignity in equal measure. They need more than a temporary bed. They need legal assistance, psychological care, education, and opportunities for work. When Yuga says, "I want to rebuild my life in an honest and decent way," it is more than a personal wish. It is a reminder that behind the hells of scam compounds stand thousands of lives balanced precariously between freedom and despair. Without meaningful coordination among governments, international organizations, and communities, their freedom may remain as fragile as a pillowless bed in a foreign city, suspended in a future with no clear direction. Thank you for watching this story. If you found it meaningful, please subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video. And now it's time to say goodbye. Thank you for staying with Societal Stories.